to foster sustainable economic growth, to invigorate historic Center Village, and to preserve the rural character of the town, which are really well thought out and they're really appropriate for the town. Very pleased with those. Tonight, or the process, that basically what we want to do tonight is accomplish two things. One of the items we want to do is we want to inform you about the current situation and what we understand, what we don't understand about the hydrology issue. And to do that, Ron Fulton has generously donated a lot of time and a lot of energy into working with me and producing a video about this. So you get, what is it, about 10 minutes? 8 minutes. We were tried to keep it really succinct. We have a lot of information in there. And at the end of the day, we'll have a couple minutes to talk about that. So if that's something you feel inspired, we can talk afterwards. I think there's one other thing I need to talk about. Open up that. Oh, it's over there. So after we get done with the video, I'm going to go over this. This is basically you'll see that there are 4 tables set up. I'm just giving you an overview. There are 4 tables set up. And what we're going to ask folks to do is to divide up amongst the 4 tables and to give you a prioritized list and then have a short discussion. We're going to probably spend somewhere in the area of about 10 minutes. There'll be a coordinator and a timekeeper at each table. And then the coordinated timekeepers are going to rotate. You're going to stay at the table that you originally sit at, so you don't have to get up and down and move around. So that's the general process. And then at the end, we're going to take our lists and we're going to compile those, but we would like to get a few comments written down, kind of like the highlights from your table, and that's what the white sheet is for. And I don't want to forget to thank Mr. Craig White for providing pizza tonight. Okay, we all set. Is everybody good? Okay. One. Hello, I'm John Lepore, Chairperson of the Bernardston Master Plan Implementation Committee, member of the Planning Board, and a certified ecological restoration practitioner. I am now a retired Pioneer Valley Regional School science teacher, where I taught science for 27 years, and have lived in town for over 20 years. Ever since Hurricane Irene hit us in 2011, I have been aware of the fact that Bernardston has a problem, which is also clearly laid out in our new master plan. Our center village is in danger of drowning due to a rising water table. We can see this most clearly by what has happened to Darwin-Scott Swamp in the very center of town. The water there has risen over the years for a variety of reasons, to the point where it may be threatening the livability of our center village. And while it would be great if we could take steps to lower it, our challenge is that state and federal wetland laws make it difficult and expensive to do so. Here is what a professional wetland scientist has to say about altering the Darwin-Scott Swamp. In summary, protected wetlands may not be removed, filled, drained, or altered without a permit. It is unlikely that the owner, Mass Fish and Wildlife, would agree to an alteration of this magnitude. William Luttrell, professional wetland scientist, Luttrell Ecological Consulting, Coleraine, Mass. According to longtime resident Bill Shores, who worked with Darwin-Scott extensively in the early 1960s on the then hayfield, the exit pathway for the water cannot be lowered. In the 1840s, when the railroad bridge was constructed, hemlock beams were laid down as footings and have been preserved underwater ever since. These cannot be removed or altered without the railroad's permission, which they are highly unlikely to provide. So what can we do about it? Let's begin by taking a look at the problem, understanding what we know so far, and what more we need to learn. We know that the center of Bernardston surrounds what is now called the Darwin-Scott Swamp, but which 50 years ago was a hay meadow. For the last 15 years or so, the water table has been rising to such an extent that we now think of it as a swamp instead of a meadow. Flooding incidents in Center Village have continually increased since 2005. Since Hurricane Irene in 2011, a number of Center Village septic systems have failed. The drainage through Cushman Park and Cushman Lot has been slowed by sediment buildup from Fox Hill Brook, and the clogged culvert had to be replaced in 2012 after Hurricane Irene. Beavers in Darwin-Scott Swamp are routinely removed to prevent damming that can cause flooding. Cushman Hall, which was a Powers Institute dormitory for over 100 years, was condemned and torn down in the 1990s when it became unlivable, partly due to a failed septic system. The south side of Cushman Park has become too wet to use as a ball field. After much searching, we have only been able to find pertinent town records on water table changes at the Sunoco gas station. The Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection monitored the Sunoco station for 15 years, from 1999 to 2014. From this, we have documented proof that the water table has risen about 1.5 inches during this time. While this may not sound like very much, the pattern is serious because the Sunoco area is higher than much of the rest of our Center Village. So, if the Sunoco water table has risen that much on its higher ground, how much more has it risen in the rest of Center Village's lower area? And in light of this, it is important that we recognize about 50% of the soils in Center Village have a water table just below the surface right now. Along with myself, many others of us are concerned because for all of us, regardless of where we live, the Center Village is the heart of our town. So who and what are at risk because of this? Businesses in Center Village, people living in Center Village area who are directly impacted, town government boards and committees, and the townsfolk who are concerned for our future welfare. In short, all of us who are aware of this situation. This is what we know so far. Now, what more do we need to learn? How quickly is the water table rising? Has the rising water table caused septic systems to fail in Center Village? If it has contributed to the septic system failure, how many more of our septic systems are at risk if the rise continues? What will be the consequences to the town's future economy if we continue to ignore this? Specifically, how will the rising water table affect the health, well-being, and livability of our Center Village? In the last 50 years, what land use changes in the upper watershed areas may have contributed to this problem? Given all of the above concerns, what options do we have to control this rising water table? In short, where do we go from here? First, in collaboration with the Franklin County Regional Council of Governments, we've received a grant that will enable us to gather information from existing town resources and records. For example, from the Highway Department, where are all the culverts located that drain into Darwin-Scott Swamp? From the Board of Health, what are the conditions that have caused septic system failures in the past 7 years? Beyond this, what we can't do on our own will require additional outside professional help. We need to accept the fact that we can't do all of this by ourselves. First and foremost, we need the assistance of a professional hydrologist, which also is called for in our master plan. A professional hydrologist can provide the town with an authoritative set of answers so that we can better understand our options and possible solutions. Specifically, the hydrology study would clearly identify the sources of water and sediment filling Darwin Scott Swamp that contribute to our rising water table. This will also open the door for significant outside funding support, which is essential for us to secure a healthier future. Bernardston's livability and sustainable economic development depend on this. And if we meet these challenges well, it will also allow us to maintain the town's unique rural character, of which we are all so proud. In light of this, we hope that you will support the warrant article on our town meeting agenda, authorizing us to hire a hydrologist. Thank you for your attention. So we have time for a quick discussion if people have comments or questions that we might be able to answer, or people have things that they want to say. Yes, sir.
In the video, it said that we were removing the beavers, and they're letting us do that.
You can by state law because of it puts the town's health and welfare at risk. Yes.
So how are we working with Mass Fish and Wildlife on this issue?
They pretty much, their policy, according to there's a copy, by the way, I should say this. There's a copy of the letter in a folder up here. I didn't make enough copies for everyone, but if you'd like to take a copy of it with you, you can read it. But basically, the regulations, we have someone here from the ComCon as well, Conservation Commission, who can explain it. But basically, because it's a wetland, we really can't do anything about it. We can't dredge it. We can't alter it. The permitting behind it it's almost impossible to get a permit. Mass Fish and Wildlife's policy it's for conservation. It's considered to be a conservation area. You can't touch it.
So has anybody in town actually spoken?
Yes. Yes, I've spoken to them, and we began dialogue about the possibility of buying it back, or at least maybe coming up with some kind of an exchange, and that may be a possibility down the road. But still, even if we here's a caveat with that. Even if we get it back, we still have to go through a permitting process. We still have to do what is called, if we wanted to do something, they would have to do a wetland replicate, what is called a wetland replication. And so if you take whatever wetland you take, you have to replicate it in the vicinity of that area, and in the process of trying, and where you're going to put it, it's already, everything else around it is higher, so there's no place to replicate it to. So that's basically off the table in terms of really doing anything with, unfortunately, but that's where we are. And there are other stories that go along with that in Bernardston's history, where there was an opportunity back in the 60s to actually work with that and make that into a recreational area and make that into a lake. Some of you may not know that, but I just learned that from Bill Shores in an interview. So that was an opportunity that the town turned down 3 years in a row, and we're kind of living with those consequences now. That's what's happening. So we have to come up with a better solution. Bill?
Glenn, you addressed downstream from the center of town. I don't know if upstream is much of a factor in all this. Specifically, there was beaver activity upstream as well. There was an intervention made by the town, and I understand their beavers are coming back. Is that a factor in this issue?
So the question is upstream's is that an issue with this hydrology issue? It really depends. I don't know enough about the situation with the upstream beavers to be able to respond to that. First I've heard of it.
Is that the sort of thing that a professional hydrologist would be looking at?
Yes, that's one of the categories. So he's going to look at, changes in rainfall, which he's going to look more specifically at changes in rainfall. And I know you didn't get much of a chance to look at this graph, but this is the information from the Sunoco station for the 15 years. That was shown on the video, and this will be available. What's interesting about it is the 3 peak years. The general trend is that it's increasing about 1.5 inches. That's the black line, and the 3 years that I have highlighted here. This one here, it was the 19th wettest year in 123 years of recorded history. This one here is this is in 2005. This is the, 4th wettest year since in 123 years of recorded history, weather history in Massachusetts. And this, which was the year we had Irene, was the 2nd wettest year we had in recorded Massachusetts history. This isn't particular for Bernardston, but this is, statewide average. Bill Meese?
Can you clarify, John, is that graph showing us rainfall amounts, or is it showing us water table?
This is showing you water table. This happens to be, and these blue markers are flagging the years, the water amount. So I'm actually doing 2 things here. And the black line is showing you an upward trend. The Sunoco, for purposes of discussion, the Sunoco is on the edge of the wetland that is displayed on, it's displayed on this map. Covered with red dots. Okay. The Sunoco station, as you know, is over here, right on the edge of this. This is the watershed area we're talking about. There's actually 2 watershed areas, and it's right on the edge. So it's actually on higher ground. So that change in water table could actually be more than what that is shown. Any other points of clarification that people need? Yes, sir.
My name is Paul Berta. I'm the president of the Mobile Home Park, Bernardston Country Estates, and I just want to let everybody know that we do have similar problems down there with water runoff, flooding, and we're looking at replacing our septic system in the next 10 years.
Oh.
I know we're just outside of Center Village, but I was wondering if there's any way we could be included as part of Center Village. So if they did do a septic system, we could look to that rather than spending $350,000 to build our own.
Yeah, those are great things to know. Are you sure we're outside of Christina?
Just 1 or 2 houses, I think.
Okay.
I think it ends at right at Depot Street there.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if the White House is included or not. I'm not sure if the Blue House is.
Okay, I didn't bring a map.
Christina
Christina Wisk is the chairperson of the planning board.
The Center Village zone will go back 250 yards, I believe it is, and then it becomes agricultural.
Okay. These.
But the bulk of your property, if it's in a certain zone, then that's what you would go by for zoning. If your septic system is in the Center Village, which it sounds like it is, it's right near the entrance, isn't it?
That's where Leachfield is, yes.
Your leach field
Yeah.
is right there.
Yeah.
So that's in the Center Village.
Okay. Well, that's what we were wondering. We just wanted to make you guys aware. We did go to the board, to the selectmen a couple years ago, asking if we could get some kind of a grant to redo our septic, and I had mentioned that this would be a perfect opportunity for us to get into the septic system if you guys were thinking about that, especially with grant money and others that you would probably get to build a system. We have 60 people living in 38 homes.
Right.
So
All
we're
right.
a very high density area.
Yeah, we're a little ways away from really understanding. That's what we're really focusing on, the hydrologist.
Right.
But definitely
we have a lot of water issues too. We flood every year.
Right,
A lot of it's from the farm next door.
Yep.
Because of the way it's being used, they don't, plant materials to keep the water from running off. We just get it all running down.
Exactly.
So what comes to us comes to you.
Right.
And it's right backed up to the swamp also on that, right behind.
Absolutely.
The snow. So we're concerned also, and we just like you guys to know that.
Absolutely.
We'd be willing to participate in any way we can to help you with those issues, because we are having a lot of issues.
Definitely. I've been trying to get this hydrologist here so that we have the information that we need, and your concern will definitely be included on that list if we can get the hydrologist. The town has to vote on it. No one's asked how much the hydrologist is going to be. How much is the hydrologist going to be?
Whatever it costs, that's what we-
has to be done.
Yeah, it's $8,000 to hire a hydrologist to do this study, which is not a lot of money in my opinion, but it's a lot of work.
What does this hydrologist do? Determine where the water's coming from, where it goes? It comes with suggestions of what to do?
So, yeah.
What do they do specifically?
So a hydrologist is going to look at soil types, the type of bedrock that's underneath anything, if there's bedrock, He's going to look at beaver activity and signs for beaver activity, probably with cores. Look for permeability within these areas, amount of organic matter and muck that's accumulated, aggregation. I'm not saying that right. There's an extra syllable in there. Forgive me. The accumulation of material in the bottom of stream beds and water and beds that basically fills in the bottom and decreases the volume in the body of water.
So he's gonna suggest how to prevent it, 'cause from what my impression is like we can't do anything about it. We know there's muck in the stream.
Right.
So, but we can't clean it because
It's a wetland.
Right. It's a wetland.
So how would a hydrologist help us?
Well, so the hydrologist is going to, first of all, really need to understand the causes and the implications from that. We need to know, we don't know 100% that this septic system here failed because of the water table. Or was it because lack of maintenance, which could be another cause. I mean, people are older, whatever, we have an aging community and people forget, like when the last time they got their septic system cleaned out and all of that, or they're aged, or, the system's older or whatever. So we need to know that. So at that point, and the hydrologist is going to help us with that, it's also going to help us better understand where the water is coming from. For example, water source that you might not think about, we think about runoff and we think about precipitation, but what about every time we turn on our tap or flush our toilet or wash a load of laundry? Where does that water go? That goes into the same resource area. So and by our water use, we're adding to that as well. How much that is, we don't know. I mean, we need to get that data. We need to line that all up and say, and be able to go to the various bodies and say, this is what we know. This is a scientific proof. We have the scientist that's done it. We have all this information compiled. In order to be able to say, give us money, in order to apply for the money, is the essential next step that we need to be able to move it forward. Yes, ma'am.
And that being said, then would Mass Fish and Wildlife be more apt to give us a permit if it was natural? It was a natural cause. It was not.
Mass Fish and Wildlife doesn't issue the
Or,
permits. DEP.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's.
Because you didn't say they wouldn't. You just said they probably would.
Yeah, the DEP, if they did issue a permit, okay, what I am going to say for certain, and we got to a point where our only choice is to do a wetland replication. We physically can't do a replication. Replication is the last thing you can do.
So if you could not do the replication and this water is becoming an issue and it needs to be diverted or whatever, how would the town ever be able to do that?
I think she's talking about like rainwater.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're right.
Place rather than
And the water
putting it back.
table's raising and people's septics are failing.
Right.
And say they're great because most people who pump septics, they'll send you a card in 2 years saying, hey, time to do it again because
Right.
they want to get paid.
Right.
So if these, say septics start failing, the water table's rising, people can't afford to fix them and properties deteriorate, people move out, maybe it gets condemned, then, I mean,
So I understand your question, and I really
I
understand.
just want to know what the goal is.
Okay, so let me clarify it a little bit more. So, for example, before they're ever going, if we were ever going to even have hopes of getting any kind of permit, which is probably be miraculous, and it would take quite a bit of time to do. Not only that, it would be extremely expensive. We're talking tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars just for the permit, not for any of the work. Okay, just it's extremely expensive. If we could get it, before we can do any of that, we have to show that we've done everything possible in this town, including putting in what are called low-impact development areas, bioswales, places of water, catchments of water can stay and slowly infiltrate during extreme events, those kinds of things. Before they even, and we have all of this research done before we could even begin that conversation. At the end of the day, when we do have that information, that maybe as our last option, maybe, but I can't say for sure, and I'm not going to. I could never commit to that. It's highly unlikely that it would ever happen. Highly unlikely. What Bernardston appears to be facing, once we find out that the water table is rising, once we find out that the septic systems are in fact related to this, the failures are related to this, to the water table, and we can show that, and any other issues that come out of that, then we have the evidence to be able to move other aspects of our day-to-day living forward. For example, town may need to start thinking a lot more about water conservation. That's a huge piece of this in terms of what's going on. We may need to think about installing more low-impact development structures to slow water down and to mitigate that part of it. We need to think about, the town's already working on culvert replacement. We have a grant now for that. And to really think about where those culverts are. One of the questions I had is how often, and this is a state question, and this is not to deflect your question, but just to get it out there, how often are catch basins cleaned along Route 5 and 10 that contribute to this? Because if those have a lot of sediment in it, they're not going to be as effective in what they're doing their job and removing that sediment. That sediment's going into and filling that bottom of Down Scott Swamp or those stream beds. Those are things we don't know, and those are things we need to find out before we can move forward. One more. Okay. I hope I don't mean to deflect your question, but it's very difficult. Time for one more question? Anyone else? Okay, great. Thank you. Great discussion. I really appreciate your coming, and thank you for coming tonight. We're not done. Let's see, where are we at? Just to remind you, so we've accomplished this purpose. The next thing we're going to do is we want to get actionable item priorities from our community on the 4 master plan recommendations for a 5-year plan. So we're putting together. We've been working for over, I think it's 14 months on looking at 89 recommendations out of the master plan. There'll be a copy of this at each one of your tables, so you can take a look at this. It's about 25 pages of recommendations. This book is online. It's also in the library if you need to see that. But the categories are, this is going to be the various tables. The first one, there are 19 recommendations in that. We've cut it down to, I think, 6? Who's on the table? Who's on that one? I think 5 or 6. 4. We have it down to 4. So we've really whittled these down. We've kind of massaged them and made them, and we've combined some. In some cases, we really took them and made them really appropriate for Bernardston. Some of them were a little bit thought of as a little bit outside of the realm. I'll move this over here so we get that. There we go. So in any case, zoning and policy. So this is table 1. That will be education and outreach. And this is zoning and policy. This is going to be table 2, which is back here. Improve municipal infrastructure and services. There's 30 recommendations from that. That will be there. And then the 4th table, which is strengthen community connections, and there are 14 of those, and that will be at that table. So you have your numbers. No, you don't have your numbers. So you want your numbers. What we're going to ask you to do is to find a seat at one of these tables, divide yourselves up, and you're going to go to those tables, and you can stay there, and the various people are going to rotate around and get the information. You're going to have about 10 minutes, and during that time, you're going to get, and if you feel like you're being rushed, here's another option. If you feel like you're being rushed and you want to withhold your judgment, there is another option. You can listen and absorb and take this in tonight, but I am going to ask you to go on the town's website. You can download the entire form, do your prioritization, and mail it to me. Either mail it to me, email it to me, or drop it at the town hall. All right, so you don't feel rushed. Because I know it's a lot of information, and we spent 14 months doing it, and we're expecting you to do it in 10 minutes. Somehow doesn't sound quite right, but at least you get an introduction and you get the dialogue, which I think is really important. And we really want to hear what you have to say. So after you've had a few minutes to just kind of do your own thing, we're really going to ask people to really do their own thing and not rely on other people's opinions too much. You can ask questions and clarify the various leaders, but really try to get something together if you can. like to just have a general discussion about it, give the coordinator an opportunity to write a few things down, so we can just talk at the end in terms of what are some of the general comments about each one of these categories. We're going to try to move it along, and again, I really appreciate you coming. So, about a quarter of you here, a quarter of you there. Yeah.
So we had, for group one, it was, what do we call that? Community? Strength and community connections. So there was a question that Jane and I attempted to answer about why was the recommendation for the Habitat for Humanity recommendation, why was that recommendation related to the water table? There was a check mark next to it. And I think the way we attempted to answer it is because we, or at least I assumed that there was the potential for that happening was probably in the Center Village area, the best potential. And then Jane had another thought on it also. I can't remember, where are you, Jane?
I'm right here.
Yeah, there she is.
I'm hiding.
Yeah.
She can't remember.
Well, my thought was that even if you build up on the hillside, the water, when you flush the toilet, as John said, it still all has to run downhill. Every bit of water that hits your property goes downhill, unless you happen to be in that swamp and then you're at the bottom of the hill.
Right.
And stuff goes downhill, doesn't it?
That's right.
So, do you have any other thoughts on it? Is that pretty good?
No, I think that was
Yeah.
pretty much the mark. That was maybe a little bit of a stretch in some regards, but it felt like it fit when we talked about it. So, good explanation.
There was excuse me, a question as to why the Darwin Scott property ended up in state hands. And I've heard the stories many times. I asked Bill Shores when I was sitting next to him just a few moments ago, and well, it's complicated, isn't it? So it went to town vote a couple of times, defeated a couple of times, 3 times, and the Darwin Scott did modifications to the property. I don't know if we want to go into all this, but eventually the Darwin sold it to the state, right?
Right. You just said, bye, out of here.
Yeah. So there was a question that came up about the bike path recommendation and what roads might be considered for bike paths if that was ever going to happen. We didn't have an answer for that. Any thoughts? It's just an idea that might be developed.
Yeah, trying to get people out for exercise and give people an opportunity to be able to move around the town outside of their cars.
Couple of comments. Money always follows culture. So, Bob Raymond and I decided we were going to buy the grain mill and start an art center. You got a list? You have a list?
And other investors are
Just leave your card on the table, Mark.
And then another comment, that veterans housing should be considered as a possible alternative to low-income housing in town.
Absolutely.
So, that's what we
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Are you the spokesperson?
I am.
Absolutely.
Education and outreach. Some of the suggestions prioritized market studies and finding out what the town could use as a priority, and then establishing committees to implement some of the strategies the market study identified. Maybe using the COG as a resource for helping attract some of those businesses into the community. So that was the start of the priority. And the some of the comments that were made is that a lot of people here are not really prepared to make definitive recommendations because they don't know that much about it. So I think that just came, and we talked to you about that earlier.
Good point. Yeah. And that's why I'm inviting people to take a little more time. I know I have busy schedules. Look at the master plan online. You can download the various chapters if you so decide. You can go to the library or whatever, and then explore it some more. You know, submit your decisions afterwards. That's great. That's helpful. But whatever you feel comfortable with.
And I think that the background is that the master plan was developed over 2 years with the Conway School of Landscape Design, and then having public input. So a lot of the people that came to those sessions gave their input, and then the plan was developed based on that. And this is just kind of a reaffirmation of, out of the priorities identified, what are the top that you want to see happen, so maybe they can be implemented. So,
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much. Who's next? Kel? Do you have any summarizing points? The microphone's up here, by the way.
It's pretty hard to summarize. The challenge is that all the issues that we had, people agree are important for one reason or another. I think we've dealt with runoff, controlling runoff, we dealt with housing, affordable housing, and we dealt with wastewater treatment. Those are basically 3 issues that our little group dealt with. And everyone, of course, agrees they're all important, and how do you prioritize them? It's a challenge. But I think the bigger picture, thought was that we should address the things that are most easily done first, and then pick up the others as time goes by and we have the energy and expertise to follow through. And from that point of view, I think everyone seemed to think that the runoff issue was something that could be addressed fairly quickly. Maybe not as quickly as we'd like, but because it would take homeowners to buy into the whole arrangement. Yeah. But anyhow, it seemed like a doable thing that the town could address, anyhow, after a hydrology study.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you. And last but not least, who remind me? Sarah?
Me?
Mike's up here, Sarah.
Austin. So in the zoning and policy section, I think every group recognized that a lot of these recommendations are dealing with changes or potential development in the Center Village District. But then we're also realizing that there's a lot of water issues there. So we need to either address those problems or expand our definition of what the Center Village District is and try and expand beyond the current borders of that. And also, I think every group agreed that providing housing to ensure that younger people and seniors can remain in Bernardston is something that was really important.
Thank you. Is there anything else?
I have a question.
Absolutely.
So, one of the things that we used to have in town was a business association. So, how many people here own businesses? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Would you people be interested in starting a business association within town so all of you can start working together for a common goal to help develop this town?
We'll start tomorrow.
You mean like a Rotary Club?
No, a business association. In other words, they might work together to help each other with their businesses, but to develop, but also to maybe do an association so that you can put out their discounts for town residents. Maybe some do specials or whatever, or do an event. I don't know. I mean, your imagination is endless, really. So,
right.
I'd be willing to join also. hate to say who I work for. I should be proud of who I work for. But I work for Sandry. And so I have Crump and Fox. I can probably get people to really get involved with Crump and Fox also and be part of the business association. And I just think it's important to get some of the big businesses in town involved with the small businesses and try to help each other out. And that's my personal feeling. Mark?
So piggybacking on what you're suggesting, I'm on the board of the Franklin County Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
And we're trying to spearhead local business associations to come under the umbrella of the chamber so that the administrative responsibilities that you have might be able to be
That
accomplished
would
by
be
the
great.
chamber. Northfield just started.
Okay.
They're now members of the Franklin County Chamber. Shelburne Falls, Montague. So
Did everybody hear Mark?
Great. Well,
So Mark can now be our designated contact person.
Hey, neighbor.
So are we going to take names and contact information before we leave the meeting, or?
I think that would be, Mark, would you want everyone's contact information? Would that help, or?
you should head it up, and then when you get it
I should head it
established-
up, just what I need, another camera.
So before
Certainly, I would be
people,
happy to.
great, thank you very much. That's great and generous. And all of you were very generous with your time. I appreciate that. I just want to reiterate the importance of getting out to the town meeting and really taking a look at this hydrology issue and voting for the hydrologist. And it may seem it's a lot of money for this year in the town budget. I know that that's asking a lot. Things are really stressed. But for as you saw from many aspects of the master plan, that is one of the first things that it says needs to be done. Is this issue needs to be worked on and begin, really need to dig into it and begin to understand it and to move the master plan forward. So I want to thank everyone once again for coming tonight and giving your time very generously.